Good morning, I'm Gretchen Ho. It is Tuesday, the 29th day of July, bringing you Morning Matters because your mornings matter. Let's get to the stories that matter today. President Bongbong Marcos blasts widespread corruption and poor public services in his fourth State of the Nation address, all while championing a renewed push for affordable rice, stable power, and quality education for all Filipinos. Leadership remains unchanged as the 20th Congress opens. Senator Chis Escudero secures another term as Senate President, while Representative Martin Romualdez is re-elected as House Speaker. Was the President's fourth SONA a success or a missed opportunity? Opinions are sharply divided. Some were content with its message, but others felt key topics like online gambling and the U.S. trade agreement were completely overlooked. Stay tuned as we discuss this further. Welcome to our program, Morning Matters, where we talk about the issues you need to know for the rest of your day. Now, first on the agenda. In his fourth State of the Nation address, President Bongbong Marcos slams poor services and corruption while pushing key promises on rice, power, and education. Let's look back on the fourth SONA in this report.
President Bongbong Marcos delivered his fourth State of the Nation address, which lasted an hour and 10 minutes. Among the issues he didn't shy away from addressing was the poor water service, something he is already investigating.
Nakita ko na ang report. Kaya't ginagawa ng luwa ngayon ang mga mabisang hakbang laban sa palpak na serbisyo ng mga water district at kanilang mga joint venture partners. Titiyakin ng luwa na mailalagay na sa ayos ang serbisyo ng tubig ng milyong-milyong nating mga kababayan at gawin mas abot kaya naman ang presyo. Higit sa lahat, titiyakin natin mapapanagot ang mga nagpabaya at nagkulang sa mahalagang serbisyong publiko na ito.
When it comes to electricity, the President also acknowledged the power issues in various parts of the country, including Siquijor.
Dapat nilang ayusin ang pamamahala ng mga kumpanya ng kuryente at ipag-utos ang pag-refund kung kinakailangan.
The government hasn't forgotten about teachers. According to the President, they will receive payments for teaching overload and overtime work starting this year. His administration is also focusing on students' mental health. He called on Congress to provide funding for this. This came with an apparent side comment on laptops previously purchased for the Department of Education.
Ang mga laptop na laan para sa bawat guro sa public school. Tiniyak natin na walang anomalya sa pagbili ng mga laptop na ito.
The President proudly declared that the promise of 20 peso per kilo rice is now possible.
Napatunayan na natin na kaya na natin ang 20 pesos sa bawat kilo ng bigas nang hindi malulugi ang ating mga magsasaka. Binabalaan ko ang mga trader na magtatangkang magmanipula ng presyo ng palay o ng bigas o manloloko ng mga magsasaka. Hahabulin namin kayo dahil ang trato namin sa inyong ginagawa ay tinuturing naming economic sabotage.
President Marcos also zeroed in on the administration's priorities in terms of peace and order, one of which is the case of the missing sabongeros.
Hahabulin at pananagutin natin ang mga utak at mga sangkot, sibilyan man o opisyal. Kahit malakas, mabigat o mayaman, hindi sila mangingibabaw sa batas. Higit sa lahat, ipararamdam natin sa mga salarin ang bigat ng parusa sa karumal-dumal na krimen ng mga ito.
PBBM also dropped a strong warning to those allegedly stealing from flood control projects.
Kitang-kita ko na maraming proyekto para sa flood control ay palpak at gumuho. At yung iba, guni-guni lang. Huwag na po tayo magkunwari. Alam naman ng buong madla na nagkakaraket sa mga proyekto. Mga kickback, mga initiative, errata, SOP, for the boys. Kaya sa mga nakikipagsabwatan upang kunin ang pondo ng bayan at nakawin ang kinabukasan ng ating mga mamamayan, mahiya naman kayo sa inyong kapwa Pilipino. Mahiya naman kayo sa mga kabahayan nating naanod o nalubog sa mga pagbaha. Mahiya naman kayo, lalo sa mga anak natin na magmamana sa mga utang na ginawa ninyo nang binulsan nyo lang ang pera.
Moreover, the president urged local governments to support physical activities and sports. He then gave recognition to athletes who brought honor to the country, including Manny Pacquiao, Heidelin Diaz, and Carlos Yulo. And he didn't forget to mention PNP Chief Nicolas Torre, who won by default in his boxing match against Davao City Acting Mayor Baste Duterte.
Sama na rin natin yung bago nating kampiyon, si PNP Chief Nick Torre.
The 20th Congress opened with the re-election of Senator Cheese Escudero as Senate President and Representative Martin Romualdez as House Speaker. Here is a report.
Senator Francis Escudero retained his position as Senate President after securing 19 votes during the opening of the 20th Congress. Senator Joel Villanueva, who nominated Escudero, commended his leadership, saying the Senate had remained on the moral high ground under his guidance, particularly in handling the impeachment issue.
Sa inilabas po na desisyon ng Korte Suprema tungkol sa impeachment, ang tanong, Ginoong Pangulo, hindi pa po ba klaro na tama ang landas kung saan dinala ni Senator Escudero ang buong Senado? Napanatili natin ang moral high ground ng Senado.
Escudero also received support from members of the Duterte bloc, as well as from Senators Bam Aquino and Kiko Pangilinan, who have since joined the majority.
It is no longer an act of defeat or surrender. Instead, it is one of conviction. We are making the right decision. The shield-bearer leader with a heart is the right choice.
Meanwhile, Senators Risa Hontiveros, Mig Zubiri, Loren Legarda, Ping Lacson, and Tito Soto remain in the minority. Soto, who garnered 5 votes for Senate President, now assumes the role of minority leader following tradition.
I am always honored by any position entrusted to me by my esteemed colleagues. So I pledge to perform the duties and responsibilities of being the minority leader.
Senator Jingo Estrada retained his post as Senate President pro tempore, while Senator Villanueva continues to serve as Majority Floor Leader. In his speech, Escudero urged colleagues to work beyond the noise of politics.
Hiling at panawagan ko po sa aking mga kapwa senador. Magtrabaho po tayo sa kabila ng ingay ng politika.
In the House of Representatives, Leyte 1st District Representative Ferdinand Martin Romualdez was also re-elected as Speaker after securing 269 votes. He was nominated by Quezon Representative J.J. Suarez and seconded by Ilocos Norte Representative Sandro Marcos, who was later elected as the youngest majority leader in House history. However, several lawmakers abstained from voting, including Representative Albi Benitez, who said the chamber needs a leader who would stand behind President Marcos, not pull him down. In his speech after taking his oath, Romualdez criticized the Supreme Court's recent decision declaring the articles of impeachment against Vice President Sara Duterte unconstitutional.
The court may close a case, but it cannot close a cause. The pursuit of accountability is not a moment. It is our mandate. And as your Speaker, I will be here, not just to preside, but to protect. Hindi ko kayo iiwan sa gitna ng unos. Sisiguraduhin kong walang bubong ang babagsak, walang pader, magigiba, at walang miyembro ang mapapabayaan.
Meanwhile, Davao Representative Paulo Duterte walked out after roll call, refusing to vote and calling the process a political circus. Suarez was elected Senior Deputy Speaker, while Representative Marcelino Libanan was named Minority Leader.
Tension and protests mark President Bongbong Marcos's fourth State of the Nation address. Protesters in Quezon City torched effigies of President Marcos and Vice President Sara Duterte. They accused the president of being subservient to the United States. On the other side, pro-Marcos groups gathered despite the rain. Supporters in red carried placards, wore costumes, and watched the SONA on their phones.
Kung talagang gusto niyang magkaroon siya ng legasiya, pakinggan niya ang mamamayan, no? Tugunan ang totoong kahirapan, magkaroon ng tunay na independent foreign policy na hindi dinidiktahan ng mga dayuhan, lalong-lalo na ng Amerika.
Ekstelensya sa amin. Marami naman po talagang ginagawa siya. Hindi lang po mapaniwalaan ng mga ibang grupo.
Number one na yung mga bigas, di ba? Yung mga... naging 20. Mga tulay, mga schools, mga budget ng mga agriculture. Masaya lang kasi pagtanaw ng utang na loob. Kasi sa lahat-lahat na yon.
The Philippine National Police described President Bongbong Marcos's fourth State of the Nation address as generally peaceful. Security was tight around the Batasang Pambansa, with police closely monitoring protest sites and major access points. While several groups staged rallies, demonstrations remained calm overall. The National Capital Region Police Office estimated around 4,000 individuals joined the rallies, which were dispersed peacefully by late afternoon. Coming right up, we are breaking down President Marcos's fourth State of the Nation address. Let's discuss the key highlights and critical issues left out. Don't go away. Morning Matters will be back after a quick break. Keep it here on One News. Good morning. I'm Gretchen Ho here on Morning Matters. We talk about the most pressing issues and give you the context behind the headlines. As the nation looked for answers, President Marcos left some of the country's biggest issues unspoken in his fourth State of the Nation address. Despite growing public pressure to regulate or ban online gambling, the president made no mention of the controversial industry. Marcos was also silent on the country's new trade deal with the United States and did not mention the ongoing trial of former President Duterte at the International Criminal Court. He also skipped calls for a 200 peso daily wage hike, an issue long demanded by labor groups amid rising prices. To help us unpack President Bongbong Marcos's SONA speech, we have Guido David of Octo Research joining us today on Morning Matters. Magandang umaga sa'yo, Guido.
Hi, good morning, Gretchen, and good morning to viewers and listeners natin.
We talked about the issues he left out of that fourth SONA, but before we get to that, puntahan muna natin all the things that he discussed. This speech was done in 1 hour and 10 minutes, one of the shortest. And he started off by admitting that the dismal performance of his administration during the midterm elections was a referendum on his admin's performance in terms of basic services. What were your thoughts on that? What stood out to you in the fourth SONA in terms of both tone and content?
Well, I think it started off, something that would appeal to people from all sides of the aisle. What I mean is that critics and supporters alike would actually acknowledge that what the president said is true, that the midterms, which should have been a referendum on the administration's strength, actually showed some weakness on the part of the administration. And the president is a realist, and he realized that this is the case, and there's no sugarcoating, and that it should be confronted. And to understand why the administration is not, heavily favored in the midterms, he needs to go down to the roots and, understand what went wrong, or what things are the administration doing wrong. And I think that's part of the result. So from this soul searching possibly of the president, so he gleamed that the people are unhappy about certain things, and one of those things is we hear a lot about Gretchen about corruption. So that's why it started off I think appeasing and appealing, and I think the president quickly went to town to talk about these things and try to talk about not just what went wrong, but what he has to do right, what the administration has to do that right in the next 3 years to regain some of that political capital that was lost in the midterms.
That was actually the final bombshell at the end of his speech, calling out corruption, particularly in the flood control projects, to which I was listening to a commentary last night. Sabi ni Shelo Magno, tinitingnan daw niya kung magkakaroon ng lakas ng loob ito si Presidente na pag-usapan ng korupsyon this time around, which was previously absent in his other State of the Nation addresses. But before we continue on, let's bring in somebody to help us also dissect the fourth SONA. We have Cleve Arguelles of WR Numero joining us. Magandang umaga sa iyo, Cleve. Ikaw naman, anong impression mo on the fourth SONA? What were the highlights for you in terms of tone and content?
Good morning, Gretchen, and to Dr. David. Thank you for having me today. I was listening to your conversations, and I think many of the things have been touched upon already. But I think one of the interesting aspects of this year's State of the Nation address, as Dr. David was also discussing, was that it's very realistic in terms of acknowledging the developments in the greater political landscape, right? That is, the entire landscape is politically fractured. There are competing political factions wishing to get public support, and the Marcos administration is just one among those factions. And therefore, I think what I have observed is that there is this tone of economic populism or hints of a social welfare agenda. And my reading is that this is in response to what the administration experienced in the 2025 midterm elections. So it's necessary, if the goal is to really consolidate or mobilize public support at this point, that it's a case among competing political factions, then its investments, then the administration's investments is on expanding social services. We've heard the president talk about initiatives in education, and rightfully so, but also in health. There's emphasis on zero balance billing in DOH hospitals, the increase in the discounts in the use of our trains in Metro Manila, for example. And yeah, I think understandably that the president wants to connect with ordinary Filipinos, and he wants them to feel that they're being taken care of by this administration, because as we've learned in the last elections, that wasn't really felt that much by our people.
Well, actually, yun nga, no, yung mga public services na yun that he mentioned took a very, very huge part in his fourth SONA. I actually thought that many of the services that he mentioned there were present for a long time, pero parang hindi napapansin, no, ng Pilipino, katulad na lamang yung zero balance billing na pag-uusapan na yun when you talk to DOH. Matagal na siyang ganun, pero marami pa rin hindi nakakaalam, which begs the question, for example, ang panimula ni Presidente ay actually tungkol sa ekonomiya, but unlike previous presidents, he did not harp on economic achievements, because if you take a look at inflation, it has gone down from 5.82 to 5.98 to 3.21 to now 1.8%. Pero sabi niya, inadmit kaagad niya na kung datos lamang yung pag-uusapan, magandang ekonomiya, bumaba yung inflation, dumami yung trabaho, pero lahat ito ay palumuti lamang, walang saysay kung ang kababayan natin ay hirap pa rin at nabibigatan sa kanilang buhay. Why do you think this is not making its mark? Is there something wrong here? Guido?
Yeah, I was surprised then. You know, the president could have harped on some of the economic, improvements, as you mentioned, Gretchen. So, inflation is down. Unemployment is down slightly, based on my reading from the Philippine Statistics Authority, and it's improving. Situation is improving. Prices have stabilized, obviously because of the inflation. But instead of thumping his chest on these you know achievements, or rather these improvements, and of course we're still maybe top two or top three fastest growing economies in Southeast Asia. So these are not small things that the president could talk about. But I think he wanted to focus more on the populist aspect, because you could talk about, yeah, of course, inflation affects every one of us, but in terms of GDPs and forecasts, I mean, these are more macroeconomic in nature, and maybe doesn't really affect the every man, every person that much. So I think he focused more on what the interests of the layperson, the massa would be, and I think that was the focus of his SONA, so to speak. Parang do it for the massa. I think maybe with the reflection on the part of the president made him realize that maybe sometimes maybe we're out of touch with what the public really wants, and I think he's trying to refocus on that.
Kaya rin nag-Tagalog ng buong buo si
Yes.
Presidente. Oo.
Exactly.
Cleve, you were nodding your head. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I think if you put it in that context, no, the broader tone and the broader attempt or aim of the president's address, then you'd understand why it wasn't so triumphalist in terms of its statistical achievements in terms of macroeconomic indicators. And I really appreciated that tone. I really appreciated that it resisted the temptation of just talking about economic numbers, right? And rather focus really on what is being felt on the ground by a lot of Filipinos. Because, for example, in the last WR Numero survey, despite the slowdown in the increase in prices, and that's very important to note, right? There's the inflation rate is lower now, but that doesn't mean that prices have gone back to where it was, or that so it's still a problem for many Filipinos, and so almost half are still saying that they're struggling to meet their basic needs on a daily basis, right? In our last survey, so I think that it hits the right tone that despite some of these achievements, the overall feeling of our fellow mga kababayan natin is that it's a struggle, right? To meet their daily needs. So rather than be triumphalist or even combative, no, I think that's the challenge for past presidents. Sometimes they get combative on their economic achievements, di ba? Kaya they're also punished by the people by a decline in popularity, because they feel that what's being talked about in the SONA is not really reflective of what they're feeling on the ground. And this is a case of this is a change, right? And so if you put that into the context that the president delivered the SONA in Filipino, there was a lot of talk of what are the measures that's going to be taken by Malacanang to address itong mga pain points ng ating mga kababayan, then you see that there's really an overall attempt to connect with regular Filipinos, no? So that was the intention, and if you look at that way, very cohesive why the discussion on economic matters was done that way.
And speaking of being combative, he has been combative about his 20 peso rice promise. Sabi niya, napatunayan na natin, nakaya na natin ng 20 pesos sa bawat kilo ng bigas nang hindi malulugi ang ating mga magsasaka. So in short, sinabi niya, nag-work na, nagawa na, na-deliver na yung 20 pesos rice promise without, shortchanging the farmers on the palay gate prices, farm gate prices. Pero sabi rin niya, maglalagay siya ng 113 bilyong piso to make this a nationwide program. Your thoughts on that? I mean, you know all about numbers in terms of crunching it. Will this be heavily subsidized, and how long do you see this government sustaining that? Ido?
Yeah. About sustaining this program, I think they've done their studies, and I think it's possible. What I gather from the president's SONA speech, he stayed away from over promising. And in the past, a lot of what I heard was about foreign investments, getting foreign international cooperation.
Pledges.
I didn't hear much of I didn't hear much of that in yesterday's SONA. So I think yung reference to rice, yung bigas, the 20 pesos na achieved na, is mainly to show na what the president says he will deliver. So he stayed away from over promising. So the fact na I think they're confident that they can do this. And I haven't crunched the actual numbers if this can be done. But I think they can allocate enough resources na they can cover this. I think they're confident in this. So we'll see if the president can deliver. Pero part of what he did not cover was the minimum wage hike, and maybe because he, like I said, he didn't want to overpromise on something that he was not sure that he could deliver. I mean, that's just my reaction to this. It's not scientific, so take it for what it's worth.
Mm-hmm. Another thing that he left out, which came out on both of your surveys, WR Numero and Octa Research, itong issue ng impeachment. Which I felt like parang medyo na-confuse ako doon kasi in your surveys, for example, in Octa, your poll back in July says that 80% of Filipinos want VP Sara to face her impeachment trial. It's the same with WR Numero, I believe. Do you think it was wise to stay out of that conversation given also the SC ruling? Or given this number, baliktad, sana nag-hardline siya doon, Cleve?
Yeah, I think this is an effort on the part of the president to be really to be disciplined in the message that it wants to send for its SONA. And again, the broader context is that even before the president delivered his address, there were already attempts for the Dutertes, for example, the Duterte identified groups to hijack kind of like the narrative on what the day is going to be about, right? Declaring that they wouldn't be attending, and they didn't attend, some of them in the Senate, right? Walking out of some of the House leadership vote, for example, and talking about their current protest issues regarding the administration. The former president is an ICC, and of course the impeachment trial against the vice president. So I think that this is just a case of and I could imagine I don't know who's advising him on political communication, but I could imagine them telling him that we just have to be on point and just really be disciplined on the message, because otherwise they will be raising these issues anyways, right? But as a citizen as well, I'm still I think I share the disappointment of some that I was sitting there at the plenary hall, and I was waiting for the president to talk about these issues, and we didn't get any, especially when he started talking about the renewed efforts against corruption in government, for example, that it would have put teeth and really muscle as well on the anti-corruption efforts, because this is the biggest corruption issue at present, that's being faced by the country, right? The allegations against the Vice President Sara Duterte, but he chose not to talk about it. So I think it's, yeah, as I've said, it's discipline on the political communication side. But the other point as well is maybe this is also less confidence coming out of the midterms. There's less confidence to um, center this kind of like contentious and combative issues. You know, precisely also because that in just the dynamics of Philippine politics, you can't really attack opponents without without enjoying so much public support, and maybe they're very worried about that.
Well, in bringing up the corruption in DPWH projects, it felt like he was more, attacking his own allies and people beside him, right? Instead of the opponent on the other side of the fence. Pero what does your survey say, Guido? I mean, anong ibig sabihin itong 80% want the trial to proceed? They want VP Sara to face the impeachment trial. I mean, alongside conversations surrounding the budget and surrounding infrastructure projects like flood control.
Well, in our own survey, which was conducted July 12 to 17, among the 80% actually, and we allowed them the opportunity to, flesh out what their reasons are for wanting the impeachment to continue. And among those 80%, 59% said or answered that the vice president should address the charges to prove she is a worthy vice president and clear her name. So they're not entirely negative towards the impeachment because the impeachment can be seen as just a process, just like any legal charge. If someone files a case against me, I will have to face that case, right? Whether I'm guilty or not. So, and then 21% said, I believe in the charges filed against her, and the vice president should address the charges. I mean, mainly saying that they think that these charges are, worthy. And then 16% said the vice president should address the charges so she can still run in the 2028 election. So it's mostly, again, not necessarily negative towards the impeachment. But going back to the other matters, about economics, one thing I noticed that was missing in the president's SONA was about online gambling.
Yes.
So it was something that was not covered, as well as some international concerns. My friend and political analyst Ronald Llamas mentioned in our show last week that he predicted that the president will be talking about rejoining the ICC, but it was not also. It was not also part of the SONA, and I think, as Professor Cleve did allude to, that the president is staying away. I mean, he's tackling the issues that are confronting the everyday person, the massa. But he's staying away from being combative with the Duterte side. So everything, there was no mention of it. In fact, he was, like you said, Gretchen, mostly almost like attacking his own base. I mean, in the sense that he was addressing corruption, which, and some people are saying that it's also coming from the same base. Not everyone of that, but of course, within that base. So those are very interesting things. Maybe the president acknowledges the popularity, or that the vice president is still holding a significant base, and maybe not, or he's not going against that base, at least in that SONA. So that's what I gathered from that.
Nag-iingat pa rin, no? Very measured and calculated response from the president. Taking a look at what he ended the speech with, yung DPWH, in terms of flood control projects, do you think he signaled a serious crackdown, or will this end up to be selective accountability? Because he said, sabi niya, he tasked the DPWH to submit a list of flood control projects over the last 3 years. 3 taon lamang. When, if you take a look at the 2 trillion, almost 2 trillion budget, simula pa, I think, noong 2009, matagal-tagal na itong budget na ito. At pag kinakausap namin si DPWH Secretary Manny Bonoan, sinasabi niya, I can only speak for what happened in the Marcos administration. At DPWH pa ang magsasubmit ng listahan. Siyempre, I mean, them auditing themselves, right? Your thoughts, Cleve?
If I would be if I would be generous to the administration, then of course it's a good thing, right, that they're about to embark on this. It's a much needed intervention, given that for the past budget cycles we have already been pointing out, many budget analysts have been pointing out that there's an unusual increase, in the allocation for flood control projects, and these are usually congressional insertions, no? So they are not part of the national expenditure program, no? And the president touched on this as well. Kaya nga when they were clapping, and this was like the one that got the members of the Congress to stand up and celebrate the president's achievements and the call against corruption. That was a very weird moment for me. Seeing that, given that. It should probably be addressed to them. This issue is present, and they're part of it. Largely being driven by those pork-like congressional insertions, right? So, but if I will be more critical, and especially looking at it politically, the steps identified by the president, that the list will be drawn by the DPWH, and then they will be reviewing the list, and that the list will be made public. It could also be a way for Malacanang to stay to stay politically relevant, and to ensure that they still have political control over the members of the Congress. So you could also read it in a way that it's a threat to the members Congress, that the next 3 years this may be traditionally what we call the lame duck era of someone sitting in Malacanang, right? But I do have this list, and what you did in the past 3 years, and I could always make this public and ruin your political game in the coming years, right? So it may be a way to discipline members of the Congress to toe the line of the administration as well.
Isa pala na hindi nabanggit dito, no, sa usaping budget ay itong open bycam proposal. Kumbaga parang sinabi lang niya, threaten lang niya that for the 2026 national budget, I will return any proposed general appropriations bill that is not fully aligned with the national expenditure program. Tama nga kayo, doon sila tumayo at pumalakpak. Iniisip ko tuloy, pag sinabing reenacted budget, babalik ba tayo dun sa dati na maraming insertions? Kaya natuwa ano kaya yun? What would it take to see, for the president to show sincerity in terms of the promises that he made in his fourth State of the Nation address? Guido?
Yeah, I think if the president is as good as his word and his promises, and I think based on the SONA, it seems like he was being rather careful nga for most of it, because he was not over promising like we discussed earlier. I think transparency would be very important here, and people will just like to see results. I think that's the bottom line. If we don't see results from this, if we don't see anything na parang any expose or something like that, then it might appear that the president is not successful with his promise about about this budget, if the budget is aligned in such a way na it has all the essential items that the public needs, mga I mean, not just yung mga bloated infrastructure projects, mga flood control, but more of what the president promised, health driven, education driven, some investments in renewable energy, etc. Then it may be just a promise. So hopefully, there will be results. I know 1 year is too soon to see results, but at least as far as the budget is concerned, if analysts see that there's something anomalous or weird about this next year's budget, then we might be back to the same thing last year. Na as you said, maraming insertions, and the public would quickly lose confidence in this administration, because I think the SONA is a win for the president, and he has to capitalize on this win. But he has to not let up in his efforts to drive the administration to winning the public back. And if he's not successful, it will not be a good 2028 for for whoever the administration anoints as its successor.
No, we will hold him accountable in 2026. But overall, do you think this was a good SONA? Did we see enough results, Cleve?
Enough results. I think it was very focused on plans and current challenges. No, I think another way to look at this SONA is that it's like the president was wishing that this was the first term of his presidency, and that it's back to tabula rasa, and we're just starting all over again. I think that's the wishful thinking, that's the attempt of this particular address. Was he able to talk about issues that are very important to everyday Filipinos today? I think he was able to do that, and by that alone, I think it's a good State of the Nation address. But were there also omissions and silences? Of course, right? The legislated wage hike, that demand from labor groups, for example, the issue on online gambling, those are things that we would also have wanted the president to talk about. But it was a very cohesive speech. I think if you're an ordinary Filipino listening to the president's address, you would have gotten the message that the administration is tackling these issues, and whether it will succeed, and make sure that that will be the legacy of that administration, or it will fail in the coming years, then it's for our kababayans to judge in the coming months and the coming years, right? I just think that I guess the last thing I want to say about this is that he did touch on a lot of issues, right? That's a wide range of issues, from education, health, agriculture, transportation. And these are sectors where we face, what we call wicked problems, right? They're not easy to solve. They're very difficult to unpack, right? I would have wanted to hear from the president structural or maybe long-term solutions to these problems. But most are immediate. Mga
Relief,
immediate
yes.
Responses. And that will be good for Filipinos at home, across the country, right, needing those immediate relief, right? But for the country, we also need to pay attention to those long-term changes.
Alam niyo kung saan ako na-excite? Gusto ko nang masakyan ulit yung Actually, hindi ko pa nasasakyan ever. Yung love bus. Oh,
That's a reference to our age.
Ginugal ko pa kagabi. Sabi ko, ano ba yung love bus?
As a millennial, nagtatanong ako sa katabi ko, ano po ba yung love peace?
Well, to my age pala, I know what a love bus is. I rode it when I was young. So,
Well, malalaman natin kung effective yan. Okay naman.
there used to be a double-deck love bus around the streets of Metro Manila, like a double-decker. Like in the UK, yung mga double-deck bus. So,
Basta libre. Oh.
Basta libre.
Maganda yung itsura. We hope that the fourth SONA is not just a political balancing act, but we hope, of course, that it will signal true reform in the years to come. Maraming salamat sa inyo sa pagsama sa amin ngayong umaga. We have Guido David of Opta Research and Cleve Arguelles of WR Numero giving their thoughts on the President's fourth State of the Nation address. Stay tuned. Morning Matters. We'll be back after a quick break. Welcome back. You're still with us here on Morning Matters on One News. Several senators have shared their reaction to President Bongbong Marcos's fourth State of the Nation address. Senator Risa Ontiveros said the speech fell short in key areas, though she acknowledged that some important issues were raised. She emphasized that the president's failure to address the growing problem of online gambling was a missed opportunity. Senator Tito Soto, on the other hand, said he was very satisfied with the address, particularly the president's warning against corruption in flood control projects. Senate President Pro Tempore Jinggoy Estrada said the Senate is ready to launch its own investigation into these projects should a resolution be filed. Meanwhile, Senators Bam Aquino and Sherwin Gatchalian welcomed the president's strong focus on education in his SONA. Aquino said he would closely monitor the implementation of promised reform, while Gatchalian praised the push to strengthen senior high school and enforce key laws such as the Aral Bill.
Medyo bitin, actually surprisingly ordinary para sa SONA na right after ng midterm elections, even right after yung kanilang tariff negotiation trip sa US. So parang sampayan lang siya o shopping list. Though there were a few notable things na sinabi ni Presidente.
Nakita ko kanina sa SONA speech ni Presidente na malaking time dinevote niya sa education na dapat palakasin, ayusin na senior high school, implement yung mga batas na naipasa natin, lalo na yung Aral Bill, yung ECCD. So yun, maganda yun dahil may batas na dapat lang ipatupad.
Meanwhile, the Senate is expected to hold a caucus today to discuss the priority bills for the 20th Congress. For more updates on that, we have mobile journalist Mary Monreyes reporting to us live from the Senate. Una-una, I hope you did not sleep there. At pangalawa, mapag-uusapan ba ang impeachment ngayong magsisimula na itong 20th Congress?
Magandang umaga, Gretchen. Salamat sa concern. Hindi naman tayo nakatulog dito at nakauwi naman tayo kahit sobrang traffic at mabigat ang daloy ng trapiko kagabi mula doon sa Batasan. Pero ngayong araw, bukod doon sa caucus na schedule around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, meron ding press briefing na nakaschedule ngayong 10 a.m. kasama si Senate President Jesus Cordero. So, as expected, or if hindi man, tatanungin talaga natin kung ano na nga ba ang magiging galaw ng Senado patungkol nga dito sa impeachment case laban kay VP Sara na ni-rule ng Supreme Court last week as unconstitutional. Nakausap din kasi natin si Senadora Risa Ontiveros kahapon at ang nasabi niya, hindi raw sila hihinto doon sa simpleng, doon lang daw talaga sa ruling ng Supreme Court. So, chances are kasabay nung ifa-file ng House of Representatives for reconsideration, maaari ring magkaroon ng move sa loob ng Senado to either tackle it out to balance it. Pero ang sabi nila, at the end of the day, depende pa rin daw talaga ito sa mapagdidesisyonan ng mga senador. Gretchen.
Okay, Marymon, what are the top priority bills that we should expect to be discussed in the caucus?
Marami-rami siya. It would range from infrastructure, pero yung isa sa pinaka inaabangan ngayon na maaari talaga maging priority bill dahil hindi ito natalakay sa State of the Nation address ni Pangulong Bongbong Marcos kahapon ay yung pagdating dito sa online gaming or gambling. Dahil nga nasabi nga karamihan sa mga senador, okay naman daw yung mga nabanggit ng Pangulo pero marami rin ang nadismaya dahil kulang daw. Hindi raw, parang hindi naging gaano kasubstansya pagdating sa ibang mga pressing issue. Bukod naman sa flood control, even yung sa water service providers, yung mga senador din na nag-file either for banning or regulation ng online na gaming or gambling, asahan natin na ito ang isa sa mga ipapriority nila.
Okay, maraming salamat sa iyo para sa iyong update and abangan ka namin all throughout the day as we begin, of course, the caucus over at the Senate. That was mobile journalist Mary Monreyes joining us live from the Senate. Meanwhile, let's move on over to the House. Some lawmakers gave President Marcos an incomplete grade for his fourth SONA. ACT Teachers Representative Antonio Tino slammed the president's silence on wage hikes, saying workers are struggling as inflation rises. Kabataan Representative Rene Co also criticized the lack of clarity on how the government will address economic and constitutional crises. But lawmakers supported the president's push to investigate alleged corruption in flood control projects.
Whether sa private sector o sa public sector, no, gayong kapos na kapos ang sweldo, no, kahit na yung 50 pesos sa NCR, malinaw na barya ito. Hindi nakakaagapay sa pagtaas ng presyo ng bilihin. No? So isang glaring na talagang mukhang ayaw ng presidente at ng Malacanang sa pagtaas ng sahod.
Nandito nga tayo sa gitna ng constitutional crisis, nandito tayo sa gitna ng economic crisis, pero walang ni isang resolusyon kung paano ito haharapin. Panawagan nga ng konstitusyon, no? Proceed forthwith.
Let's now head on over to the House of Representatives for some updates. We have mobile journalist Arles de Santos joining us live on the ground. Arles, una-una, thank you so much for being with us. Finally, nakausap na rin kita. Can you give us a recap of what happened over there yesterday?
Magandang umaga, Gretchen. No? Umagang-umaga pa lang kahapon ay talaga nakita natin kung gaano kahigpit ang naging seguridad dito sa batasang pambansa. Dahil kahapon nga, July 28, Lunes, ay opisyal nang nagbukas ang 20th Congress kung saan dinaluhan yan ng 290 na mga mambabatas. Actually, mas mababa yan, no? Dahil inaasahan natin ang pagdating sana ng 317 na mga mambabatas para sa bagong kongreso na ito. Alam mo, Gretchen, kahapon, paggulong ng kanilang sesyon, ay agad na sila namili ng kanilang magiging House Speaker. Actually, hindi na natin ikinagulat, Gretchen, ang pagkahalal ni House Speaker Martin Romualdez bilang Speaker ng 20th Congress dahil bago pa man magsimula ang bagong kongreso ay nagpaabot na ng pagsuporta ang 291 na mga mambabatas. No? Actually, may manifesto pa nga at mga pumirma pa sila. Pero actually, mas mababa ang nakuha niyang boto no, na yes o pagsuporta sa kanya. 264 lang kasi ang nag-yes votes at 34 naman ang nag-abstain. Siyempre, actually inaasahan nila na yan na nga ang mga nag-abstain ay magiging bahagi ng minority bloc pero wala pang kumpirmasyon yan dahil kagaya na lamang nila Representative Tiangco at Frasco ay sinabi nila na sila ay mananatiling independent. Kagaya na rin nila Representative Paulo Duterte, Harold at Omar na magkakasabay nga na nag-walk out ng mamili ang mababang kapulungan ng magiging House Speaker kahapon. Medyo recap lang din tayo, Gretchen, sa naging laman ng ika-4 na State of the Nation address ni Pangulong Ferdinand Marcos Jr. No? Nabanggit niya ang maraming issue kasama na nga ang infrastruktura, edukasyon, kalusugan. Pero isa sa mga pinaka naging mahalaga siguro, Gretchen, na natalakay ng Pangulo ay ang programa ng pamahalaan patungkol sa early childhood education dahil, Gretchen, natatandaan naman natin na sa iba't ibang mga pag-aaral no, ay may kakulangan pa din sa mga classroom na ito sa bansa. Sa tala ng PIDS ay 42,000 na mga barangay sa bansa ang dapat na mayroong mga daycare centers. Pero 64% dito ang wala at 36% lamang ang mayroon. At sa kasamaang palad, ang karamihan pa nga dito ay mayroong mga sira-sira na mga establishmento o kulang-kulang o luma at hindi na-update. Kaya naman inaasahan na sa State of the Nation na ito ng Pangulo at sa paparating pang mga taon ay magpapatuloy ang programa ng pamahalaan para mas mapabuti pa ang serbisyo lalo na sa mga guro at mga estudyante ng ating bansa.
Wait, Les, alam natin na nung Biyernes lumabas na yung desisyon ng Korte Suprema tungkol dito sa impeachment, declaring it unconstitutional, and nahabol ng One News itong si Speaker Martin Romualdez. Sabi niya maghahain sila ng motion for reconsideration. Is that first on the agenda in the House of Representatives?
So ngayon, Gretchen, ay hinihintay pa rin natin no, ang magiging agenda para sa ikalawang sesyon ng House of Representatives ngayong araw. Pero yan nga ay isa sa ating mga inaasahan dahil alam naman natin na mayroong mga mambabatas na hati ang kanilang pananaw sa naging desisyon ng Supreme Court. May ilan na parang actually nagpreno na, no? Parang inilay interest na ang naging desisyon ng Supreme Court sa impeachment case si Vice President Sara Duterte. Pero sa araw na ito ay inaasahan din natin ang pag-adapt ng iba't ibang mga resolusyon na medyo almost noong 19th Congress at kung ano pa magiging pagbabago kasama na rin nga ang mga nabanggit na panukala ng ilang mga mambabata sa online gambling at ang 200 pesos na legislated wage hike.
Okay, maraming salamat sa inyong komprehensibong report mula dyan sa House of Representatives. We have mobile journalist Arles de los Santos joining us live from Batasan. And that wraps up today's episode of Morning Matters. We hope we've given you the right start to your morning. Let's go ahead and make the day matter. My name is Gretchen Ho. We are One News, all sides, all the time.